Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. When I uploaded my first netcode analysis video, I did not plan on starting a big YouTube channel, nor did I even dream of reaching a milestone like 100,000 subscribers. So when I realized that I would reach that milestone, I asked you guys to send me your questions, which I would then answer in an Ask Me Anything special video. So that's what I will do today. Now let's get started. What's your age and where are you from? I'm 38 years old, I live in Tyrol, that's in Austria, I'm married and I have 2 wonderful kids. What is your day job? I'm an electrical engineer, which turned out to be quite helpful for the kind of tests I do. Why did you start netcode analysis? I briefly talked about this in my last video about Battlefield 5. I'm a huge Battlefield fan since 2002 when the demo of Battlefield 1942 was released. And even though I did not like the gameplay changes that were introduced starting with Battlefield 3, which made the game more casual and less teamwork focused, I still played Battlefield 3 and then Battlefield 4, which had some major netcode issues. So like many others, I uploaded a few videos which showed some of the nonsense that we had to deal with in this game. But eventually I decided that I had to dig a bit deeper to find out what was really going on and what could cause these issues. So it was not my intention to launch a big YouTube channel, I only tried to show what was going on in Battlefield 4 and provide players with facts. So my plan was to just do one video and that's it. But then DICE reworked the entire netcode of Battlefield 4 and many players asked if I could test these changes too. Later there were then requests to test other games than just Battlefield, and I tried to fulfill that request to the best of my abilities. How did you come up with the name? So I had just finished my test in Battlefield 4 and I figured that I need some sort of a name. Since this video was about Battlefield and I tried to fight that nonsense that players had to deal with in the game, I thought that Battle Nonsense sounds good. But I also tried to tell you something that makes sense, so that's why there are the brackets. What do you do besides YouTube? So, as I said earlier, I'm an electrical engineer and I usually work about 40 hours per week unless there's an emergency. A few things happened in the past 2 years that made me check my priorities in life. So I try to spend as much time as possible with my family, because you just never know how much time you have left to spend with your loved ones. So I'm not sick or something, I'm just trying to say that you must understand how quickly something bad can happen. And so you should really spend most of your time with those you love, doing something that brings joy into your life. So we spend most of our spare time outside, but what else do you expect from someone who lives in Tyrol? Which games did you play as a kid? So I guess that you mean video games, right? Like many other kids, my brother and I had an NES, and the games that I can still remember from back then are Super Mario, DuckTales and Duck Hunt. I also remember a funny story from where I was 15 years old or so. I went to a friend who just got the original Doom and he was not allowed to play that game. So I had to put my finger on the key on the keyboard which brought up the map, and whenever his mom entered the room I had to quickly open the map so that she didn't see that we were playing Doom. She would then always say, I really don't understand why you like this maze game so much, because she just saw the map and had no idea that we were playing Doom. How much time do you invest in your videos? That depends. Usually when I do a netcode analysis for a new game, then it takes about 30 to 40 hours of work from the first time where I launch the game to releasing the finished video. When I revisit a game after it receives a patch, then depending on how substantial the changes were, it takes about 10 to 20 hours to do all tests and release a new video. So it takes a lot of time to make these videos, which means that I can't just sit down, play these games and get good at them, because I just don't have the time. This is why recently I have begun to use gameplay in my videos that was recorded by my son. So if you see this name tag here, then chances are that this was him playing. And since he got more time to just sit down and play games, his gameplay is usually even better than mine now, which is a bit frustrating to be honest. Do you think that you have enough views and subscribers for the amount of effort you put into your videos? So I'm a very curious person, which is why I investigated the networking issues of Battlefield 4. I also like to share my findings and knowledge with others, where I'm quite good at explaining even complex topics in a way that is easy to understand. So when a video that I spent 50 hours on gets 20,000 views, then this makes me happy, because these 20,000 people might have learned something from that video and some might even share that with others. But making these videos is not only very time consuming, it's also very expensive. When I do a hardware review, then I almost always have to buy the hardware myself. Same goes for netcode tests, where I need not 1 but 2 copies of the game, where I also need to plan ahead so that I have the money when new games come out later this year. Then I need 2 PCs that are able to run games at high frame rates for the network delay tests, a high-speed camera, and then there are also licensing costs for the software and online services I use. Without the financial help of my patrons, I could not continue to run this channel anymore, because the view count on my videos is way too low for the channel to sustain itself with the ad revenue generated on YouTube. I also must pay income tax for the money that I earn on YouTube and Patreon, so that is something that I must also consider when I plan my tests or if I should invest in new hardware. If you could give your past self advice about anything, what would that be? Don't work so much and spend more time with your family and friends. If you could turn back time and start your channel again from scratch, what would you do differently? So, as I said, I never planned to create a big YouTube channel, which is why I just uploaded my first netcode analysis on the channel of my YouTube account. When you go to youtube.com/battlenonsense, then you get to my channel. However, as soon as you click on the videos link, you will see the original name of my channel, which was XFPX Authority, where the FP stands for Fear Productions, which was the name of my Battlefield Machinima channel. So, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would register a new channel called Battle Nonsense and upload my first video there. Of all the things you found while researching your videos, what surprised you the most? So, what surprised me the most was that developers like my videos. In the early days I thought that they must hate me because I exposed the issues that their games suffer from. But over the years many developers reached out to me after I released a netcode analysis for their game, and while there were 2 studios that were not happy with the results of my tests, most actually like what I do, as my videos help players to get a better understanding of how complex the networking of a game is and which factors have a strong impact on the player's online experience. Once a developer also told me that by raising the player's awareness of what is required for a good online experience, they were able to push for changes inside the studio. So that is what surprised me the most during the last few years. Do you like pineapple on your pizza? No. Do you think that since BF2, DICE has lost its roots and thus created a fractured fanbase? This is something that I talked about in my Battlefield 5 video. After Battlefield 2142, EA and DICE did major changes to the core gameplay of Battlefield in order to make it more accessible, which heavily degraded the teamwork and the tactical depth. So I would not say that it fractured the fanbase. They pretty much abandoned their original player base after Battlefield 2142 because none of the later games provided that original gameplay experience anymore. And I really hope that this changes again with Battlefield 5, because Battlefield has so much more to offer than Battlefield 3, 4 and 1 allowed players to experience. What is your fondest memory of Battlefield? How most players did fight really hard to win a match, which resulted in some nerve-wracking matches that one team would then lose with just 1 ticket left. That's the Battlefield experience that I fell in love with. Why don't you stream? 2 reasons. 1. I don't think that I'm entertaining enough to watch. 2. I just don't have the time. Do you think about creating different types of content for this channel? Latest video about the newest Battlefield game was quite good. Many of my subscribers and followers on Twitter asked what I think about Battlefield 5. So even though I was very busy with another project at that time, I thought that I should just make a quick video about that, and I thought that it might get 10 to 20,000 views. I honestly did not expect that it would get about 200,000 views and attract more than 1,500 new subscribers to my channel. I did make such videos in the past for Battlefield 4, but when Battlefield 1 turned out to be a big disappointment, I just didn't have much to say about Battlefield anymore, to be honest. So if Battlefield 5 turns out the way I hope, then yeah, I might make more videos like this one again in the future. But that kind of content will probably be limited to Battlefield, simply because I don't have the time to get invested in other franchises as much as I'm already in Battlefield. How do you battle getting bored of doing these videos? They are very educational, so please keep it up. It never gets boring, as there's always something interesting to test or talk about, but sometimes it's quite exhausting when there's other stuff going on at the same time, or when I don't even have time to just sit down and play a game for fun anymore, which is why I usually don't release more than 1 video per week, or why there are sometimes 2 weeks between 2 videos. Will you do gameplay and personal opinion reviews in addition to your performance review? I don't know, to be honest. Considering that I barely got time to just sit down and play a game for fun, I'm probably unable to show you gameplay that you want to watch. But at least for Battlefield 5 you can expect that I will share my honest opinion on that game with you. Fight 100 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck. That's easy, 1 horse-sized duck, because 100 duck-sized horses don't sound like much of a challenge. How you learn to do lag analysis. I had to pretty much figure it out on my own, to be honest. If a game company offers to hire you as a networking or gameplay consultant, would you accept that offer? That would be very interesting, but it depends on the offer, as I have a full-time job that I won't quit and I still need time to run this channel. Do you play Project Reality BF2 and what do you think of it? I've known Project Reality since when the mod only had a black SUV and a few gameplay modifications, but I lost the interest when the developers began to push it towards a military simulation, since that is just too time consuming for me to play. But it is by far one of the most impressive Battlefield mods that ever existed, and you can still play it today. Out of all the content you've made, what was the hardest thing you had to research? That was the netcode of fighting games, which artificially increases your input lag to mask the network delay. You can find a link to that video in the description down below. What are your current computer specs and what were the specs of the first PC you built? The PC that I play and edit on uses a Core i7-8700K overclocked to 5 GHz on all cores, 32 GB of DDR4 memory, a Zotac GTX 1080 Mini, an ASUS Maximus X Apex motherboard, and an ASUS PG248Q monitor which runs at 180 Hz and supports G-Sync. The first PC I built myself from scratch had a Pentium 2 processor with 233 MHz, I think 512 MB RAM, and a 3DFX Voodoo graphics card. What's your favorite beer? I know what you're thinking. He's from Tyrol, so he surely has to love beer, right? Fun fact, I don't like beer. What I like is a mix of beer and lemonade, which we call Radler. What are some of your favorite movies and TV shows? The original 3 Star Wars movies, not the special editions, Star Trek, pretty much all the Marvel movies, Farscape, Firefly, Stargate SG-1, Chuck, The Orville, The Expanse and Westworld. Favorite class back in BF2? Medic as squad member, Spec Ops as squad leader. What's your workflow when making videos? What do you use to record and edit your videos, make graphics, etc.? So when I test the game for the first time, I like to just sit down and play the game for a few hours to see how the game works and to get some mediocre gameplay for the netcode analysis video, which I capture with OBS. In the description down below you can find 2 links to videos that explain my OBS setup. I edit the videos with Adobe Premiere and the graphics are created with After Effects, Illustrator and Photoshop. Top 3 favorite games. I've been playing games for more than 20 years, so I have much more than 3 favorite games. But 3 games that I enjoyed a lot are Battlefield 2, The Settlers 2 and Super Mario. Top 3 most impressive netcode results. Patch 4.2 for Fortnite, the real-time netcode of Ironside, and Battlefield 4 running at 144 Hz after the big netcode rework. What microtransaction model would you deem to be the most customer-friendly? I like how Epic Games handles this in Fortnite, because the things that you can buy don't give you an advantage and so they don't have an impact on the gameplay. Have you ever looked into or spoken with the devs about how to code a netcode, or if there's a perfect netcode? So let's make one thing clear, I'm not a developer, so I can't talk about how to code the systems that touch the networking and the hit registration of a game. However, I have been talking to developers of multiple studios about what makes or breaks a player's online experience and what can be done to improve it. What would an ideal netcode look like? That depends a bit on the type of the game, but when we talk about a fast-paced shooter, then it needs dedicated servers which are hosted all around the globe to prevent that players in some areas are forced to play with more than 150 milliseconds ping, a tick or simulation rate of at least 60 Hz. It must be able to decrease and increase the update rate of the game client in case that the player's internet connection has a bandwidth issue. It must use a sane threshold for how much lag the game compensates to mitigate the issue where players with a low ping receive damage behind cover. It needs network performance icons that tell the player when there is something wrong with his connection to the server. It must provide a proper network graph which helps players and developers alike to find out what causes weird gameplay issues. And as much of the gameplay logic as possible must be done server-side to make it as hard as possible to develop hacks. Were you cool in high school? Nope, I was not one of the cool kids. Got any resource of book recommendations if I want to apply Netcode in making multiplayer game projects? I don't know of any books, but in the description down below you will find a link to a website which has a ton of really interesting articles about networking in video games. Can you think of anything that the gaming industry hasn't explored enough and should innovate? I'm not sure. Everyone thought that VR was the next great hit, but that seems to have died pretty quickly like 3D on TVs. In terms of original and unique gameplay ideas, you should keep an eye on smaller indie titles, but larger studios also dare to experiment more and mix up old formulas with new ideas. So I think that we will continue to see many exciting new games in the future. What have been your favorite videos to make? Every video where I find a comment from someone telling me that he learned something from the video, because this is why I make them. How often do you feel like you learn something new or surprising about networking and netcode when researching for your videos? That happens quite a lot, to be honest, since many developers try very different things when it comes to the networking of their games. Ironside uses a real-time netcode, Bungie uses an insanely complex hybrid of peer-to-peer and dedicated servers, and Fortnite has an extremely low network delay even though the servers run at just 30 Hz. There is always something new and interesting to discover when I test the game. What kind of music do you listen to? Pop, rock, but also EDM, and I really like mashups if they are done well. Also, have you thought about expanding your channel to something besides just netcode analysis videos? While netcode analysis videos are the biggest part of my content, I have also done other content in the past, like my concept designs, input lag analysis videos, as well as setup guides. What's your favorite dinosaur? The Velociraptor. Do you feel that the gaming industry is really putting their best efforts to make good game connections? I think that a lot changed during the last 4 years, because more players have a better understanding of what is needed for a good online experience now. So developers can no longer say things like 10 Hz is good enough for a first-person shooter, because players will tell them that it isn't, and they can use my data from my tests to prove their point. So when you look at the results from my network delay tests, then you see that new games perform quite good compared to 4 years ago. But the publishers and studios can still do better, especially when it comes to server coverage and providing all players with low latency servers. If you could be any superhero for a day, who would you be and why? Iron Man, because Tony Stark can invent and build anything he wants. What would your dream job be? Pilot of an F-14 Tomcat. What do you think of low latency wireless mice in 2018? I will tell you once I tested them, which I will hopefully be able to do soon. What has been your favorite game in the last year? There wasn't one particular game, but whenever I had time to just sit down and play a game for fun with my son or my brother, then it was either Overwatch, Fortnite or Warframe, so these were my favorite games last year. What game are you most looking forward to in the future besides Battlefield? Halo 6 if it will be available on PC, and maybe Anthem if they don't fuck it up like the last Mass Effect game. What do you want for future games and how the game engines handle netcode compared to like how they render the map and buildings, etc. That netcode gets priority before graphics of the game when some intense gameplay is happening. So there are a few different aspects to this. First of all, the game needs a good server architecture and networking like I explained earlier. Then there is the performance of the game client. When the game runs at just 30 FPS on your PC or your console, then a 60 Hz tick rate doesn't do much, because you render just 30 frames, and so your client will most likely also only be able to send 30 updates per second to the server. For your game to feel responsive, it must be able to maintain a render rate of at least 60 FPS. So for a good online experience, the game needs good networking and the developers must ensure that the game can run at 60 FPS. On console this is relatively easy to ensure, as there are not that many different console versions. And on PC the players must simply understand that more FPS means that the game becomes more fluid. And so they should lower some of the graphic options to increase the frame rate to a stable 60 FPS. Because then the client can also send 60 updates per second and use those 60 updates that it receives from the server. What's your favorite color? Blue. Would you consider having a series of network and input lag analysis of older games that still have their servers up? I did test older games a couple of times, but whenever I decide which game I should test next, then I must also think about how many people are interested in this video, because I could test something else that might be of interest to more of my subscribers. So when I test games which are only played by a handful of people, then chances are that not many will be interested in the results of that test. Did you ever try VR? I used one of those crappy devices where you can put your smartphone in, which was not a good experience. Sadly, I never had the chance to test the HTC Vive or the Oculus VR systems. What would you think DICE could do to implement a better competitive scene in Battlefield? Should DICE stop trying to make it happen? Someone once said, "You don't pick esport for your game, it's the other way around." Which means that if you build your game with the goal that it will be an esports hit, then it will most likely fail. But if you build a game that attracts competitive players and is popular among gamers, then it might just happen to become a successful esports title as well. So in my opinion, DICE should primarily focus on building a game that attracts players who like competitive games, because you first and foremost need an audience that wants to watch Battlefield tournaments. I might be completely wrong, but I highly doubt that this is the case with Battlefield 1's player base, which is why I can't see Battlefield 1 Incursions tournaments attract many viewers. Where do your ideas and inspiration for videos usually come from? Good question. Sometimes it's an issue that I find while playing a game, or an article I read, a comment of a viewer, or an issue that I encounter at work. How are you feeling about life in general? You get a very different perspective on life as soon as you have kids. I'm a realist, so I see the issues we face, but I think that if you work hard and get your priorities straight, then it's a great time to be alive. What can we do to help you more? So first of all, I'm very grateful for the awesome support that I received during the last few years. As I explained earlier, this channel is quite expensive to run, so you can help me by watching and sharing my videos and posting comments, as that affects YouTube's algorithm when it decides which videos to recommend to other viewers. Which is even more important now, since even when you subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon, YouTube might still not show you my videos in your subscription feed, as YouTube optimizes which videos it shows you there. And if you can, then it would also be great if you could become one of my patrons, as their financial support keeps this channel alive. You can find a link to my Patreon page in the description down below. So that's all for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris, and this was Battle Nonsense.